or negative.
So you have the counterweight and the counterweight. All right.
I'm dealing with a different generation. Time will tell.
My goodness. Who's that that notes that you're going to speak from? I hope.
That's fine. We're used to it. Alright, you all good there? I'm gonna duck out before it starts in like 5 minutes. So he said if you need anything, let me know. You should be set up, I think. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else. Cool. Alright. Good luck.
Did you get all of those places? I'm not looking.
The litter companies we have from the previous place.
So Kevin and Joe will also be online, so we need to train them for anything. Okay, excellent.
How are you? Good. Good to see you.
Recording in progress.
Hi everyone, Chad, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, Kevin, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Route 2. She's gonna be rough, huh? Joe's pond. Not bad. Yeah.
signing that out.
Political sign. Yeah.
There you go. David, we're going to be discussing. Good evening and welcome to the special select board meeting. Would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and welcome to the first public hearing for the Armory Bond Project. This is the first of two, and as a town we are only obligated to have one meeting, so with this pressing we decided to have two. So thank you for coming, and I'd like to hand it over to our Assistant Town Manager, Joe Casper.
So good evening and welcome, and thank you for coming. This is an important discussion and a very important project that we've been working on at the Armory. And I'll provide a little bit of context. First, I should probably mention that we are also hosting this in a live stream through Kingdom Access Television, and we're monitoring that, and we will allow spectators and viewers there to actually ask questions online, so we're going to be watching those later. We'll also be taking questions on our virtual feed here that we have, and I just wanted to welcome all of those that are on. Also, I'd like to just take a moment before I talk a little bit about the history of the project and to introduce members of our project team. We've got David Roy from Lehman Lamphere Architects. We've got Chris Yando from Engelberth Construction. We've got Kevin Ignazak online. He's with Montrose Environmental. And I believe we'll have Joe Wythe. If he's not online, he'll probably, oh, there's Joe. Thank you, Joe. He's from Whitenburg Real Estate Advisors. We've been working on this project as a team, I dare say probably about 4 years now. And I've been working on this project closer to 10 years. And just really quickly, last select board meeting when we were bringing the bond vote articles to the select board, I gave probably about a 10-minute, maybe longer, overview of this project. But just real quick, you know, in 2009 the building was shuttered. It used to be host to our recreation department, our police department, our restorative justice center. It's had several different uses and purposes over time. In 2009, it was determined that the cost of running that facility outweighed the benefits to the community, so that building was shuttered. I dare say that maybe it wasn't shuttered in an appropriate manner to help mitigate some of the flooding events that have happened inside, but that's not really for me to determine. But anyway, extensive damage occurred over the next decade or so through mostly the freezing of the roof drains. And so the building continued to deteriorate. There was studies done about the structural integrity. I think that was 2010. That was E.H. Jansen. And then we also had a series of environmental studies and assessments that started in about 2010, 2011. During this time and just before that, also our town officials and select board worked to try to attract some developer or some reason to repurpose that project, and even had an RFP go out to sell the building for $1. And that remained available for, I don't know, 5 years maybe, and we had no takers. Since I've been here in 2015, we looked to developers, we looked to housing developers, we met with people specializing in redevelopment of armories in New England into housing, we met with community groups, there were manufacturers, there were food producers. I think we're also familiar with the History and Heritage Center that actually did a lot of that environmental assessment work that then chose to go elsewhere because of the fear of the level of the PCP contamination. So there was a lot of effort going into it. There was a group formed with the town officials and the chamber and local residents and stakeholders called the Friends of the Armory, who came together and met quite frequently to try to understand what our community needed to do to redevelop this important building on Main Street. We also, at the same time, were getting some smaller grants to study the feasibility of what to do at the Armory, and we even looked at the feasibility of finding a developer and providing them a long-term lease from the town for maybe a police and dispatch center, and that really didn't seem to work out. So it was determined that maybe the best solution that the town should look to redevelop this particular building into a police and dispatch and emergency operations center and own the facility and operate the facility. So we'll jump right into the first edition of the look at this building, and we'll see a little cost estimate graph here in a minute. But the project started at $5.8 million. That was when we were going to the voters and we asked for 5.4 through a bond vote, and we were successful. And then of course COVID comes, supply chains get all mucked up, and the availability of materials and goods really saw the construction industry just this crazy graph. Projects were doubling. And so we saw escalations from 5.8 to 6.2 that jumped up. I think it was 9.4 from 9.4, 11.4, 12.6. I even saw numbers of 13 and 14. And then really what we've done the last couple of years was we've looked at this project, we've valued engineered it, we worked with the police chief, the dispatcher director, and we tried to develop a program. We pared the size of the project down, and we still, struggled with the cost. And at the same time, we worked to procure funding, and I have a slide here that will show you the different sources that we got for the funding. And then, of course, we had a couple of sizable asks to the federal government through our congressional delegation with hopes that we could land something significant enough to make a real difference for this project. And I think maybe 4 times we submitted to congressional direct spending earmarks through Sanders and Welch and Balint maybe once. We were actually awarded through Senator Sanders' office through congressional direct spending $585,000 for equipment for this project. Several times we asked through Welch's office for 2.4, and even recently over $3 million. And then ultimately, when Welch's office pushed this through to Washington, we were pretty excited about that, but only to find out that our $2 million ask did not get funded. So it's really changing the landscape, the dynamic, and the ask to the residents about this project. So that's a little bit of history. I'd like to actually read the warning. And it says, and this is posted, and so everybody knows, and I'll talk in a second about the timeline to meet all the requirements to host a bond vote. But it seems like maybe a short window, but much of that was because we decided to take this project to bid so that we had a number so we knew. And so we had to wait until this spring, and Chris and his team put this out to bid, and that's when we got our guaranteed maximum price. Chris will talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But we have bidders right now, and so the window to keep those bids active and accurate is pretty short. So we're kind of squeezing things in about a 5-week period of time here. So it says, to the legal voters of the town of St. Johnsbury, Vermont, are hereby notified and warned to meet at the town office building at 51 Depot Square, which is right here, in St. Johnsbury, Vermont on Tuesday, June 3rd, 2025, between the hours of 8 o'clock in the forenoon, at which time the polls will open, and 7 o'clock in the afternoon, at which time the polls will close, to vote by Australian ballot upon the following article of business. Shall general obligation bonds of the town of St. Johnsbury in the amount not to exceed $3,781,873, which is in addition to the $5.4 million of indebtedness approved at a special meeting of the town on September 14, 2021, such additional indebtedness being subject to reduction from available state and federal grants and aid, be issued for the purpose of financing the costs of making public improvements, namely reconstruction, renovation, and conversion of the former Armory for use as a public safety building. The aggregate estimated total of such improvements being $12,558,873. The legal voters of the town of St. Johnsbury are further notified that voter qualification, registration, and absentee voting relative to said special meeting shall be provided in chapters 43, 51, 55, and Title 17 of the Vermont statutes annotated. The legal voters of the town of St. Johnsbury are further notified that an informational meeting will be held on Monday, May 12, 2025, and on Tuesday, May 27th at 5:30 in the evening at the St. Johnsbury Town Office Building, 51 Depot Square, St. Johnsbury, for the purpose of discussing the proposition. This was adopted at a regular meeting of the Select Board of the Town of St. Johnsbury, duly called, noticed, and held on April 28, 2025, received for record and recorded in the records of the Town of St. Johnsbury on April 29, 2025. So that is the Article 1. I briefly mentioned the timeline for the bond vote, and these all are required in a sequence to be posted in the paper, and we have to warn a public informational meeting, which has been done. And then, obviously, this is the first informational meeting, as Frank mentioned. This is not required, this meeting. We added this meeting to make sure that we could get as much involvement and provide as much information and take as much input as we could. The actual required meeting is the one on the 27th. And then we'll also post all the bond vote documents in the Caledonian Record 3 consecutive weeks before the bond vote based on the regulations. So, there. That being said, I want to take a few moments here to talk a little bit about the different phases of the project. And we've got Kevin from Montrose online, and we're going to talk a little bit about the remediation effort, and then I'll probably mention, after Kevin gives us a little bit of information, some of the funding procurement efforts that went into this remediation, which is really critical, and it's certainly important for the town of St. Johnsbury to deal with this brownfields up on Main Street. So, Kevin, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Joe. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. So yeah, as Joe has mentioned, it's been, quite a process, I guess, to get through this project. And in addition to, the things all of us have probably heard about in terms of asbestos and lead-based paint, about 10, 11 years ago, they also found some pretty significant concentrations in PCB paint. And because of the associated costs with getting rid of, in permanent landfill, these different concentrations, we embarked in close partnership with the EPA and also with the Vermont DEC to go on a robust sampling program to try and demarcate where the highest concentrations of PCBs were, to try and minimize the actual remediation costs, which the big component was the transportation and disposal. So we collected hundreds of PCB samples, and what we found was there was concentrations as high as 20,000 parts per million in this paint. And the cutoff level where it's not a concern is 1 ppm, just to kind of put things in perspective. So, the town should be commended for, the remediation that's been done and utilized its existing fundings. Not only as the building, it will be ready for redevelopment. You can see this is one of the shots in the basement on the left before the remediation. And then here's a shot on the right after all that PCB paint has been removed. Not only the asbestos, the lead, and the PCBs have been removed, but we also took out, some superficial soils outside the building, that were impacted with lead and semi-volatiles. And unfortunately, some PCBs that leached from the paint on the outside of the building. So again, it's been a long process, and it's been a very complete and thorough process, and the town can be assured that they're going to have a clean building moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. I'll talk a little bit about the funding sources. So the cost of the remediation we have listed at $2,752,364. And fortunately, there is funding through partners at both the federal level through the EPA, state level through the Brownfields Revitalization Fund, at the state level through the Vermont Community Development Program. We tapped into some revolving loan funds through a neighbor over at Northwest Regional Planning Commission, and we're working with Northeastern Vermont Development Association right now to finalize an agreement where the town can access some of their revolving loan fund. So it looks to date that we will have been able to procure $2.4 million of this 275 that's required. So that's been, in my mind, a very successful effort, and we should be proud of that effort, and I think fiscally responsible. We shows that we're fiscally responsible for that particular part of the project. I think before we talk about actual cost estimates for the entire project, I'll turn it over to David Roy, and what David can do is he can walk through the development plans, which are pared down a little since we last talked about them and showed them, and he can quickly talk about the components of each floor, just so people have a sense of what this project entails. So.
Thank you, Joe. Oh, maybe. Okay, yeah. So here we have the Main Street side of the building. This being the side on the south side, on the dentist's office side. This is on the church side, the north side, and this is the back. This is to the west, and is the side that has a secure parking area for the department on it. This is the lower floor, the basement level. It's half subgrade. There are some high windows that give light into the space. People, on this side is an access point where you can come into the building, access a vestibule there. This will be a fenced off, this is a secure fence line here. So the police department will have access from the southern side into a secure facility for parking. And they will bring a detainee or a person in to the building through this entrance and bring them downstairs into a secure area. This is not for public use. There's an elevator machine room, there's a suspect interview room, there's holding cells, processing area for fingerprinting and pictures. There's evidence storage. There's a small bathroom here, changing room and bathroom. There's mechanical space here for HVAC and electrical gear, and there's a locker room. So all of this, none of this will be publicly accessible. It'll all be secure for use by the department and whoever is coming to visit. Second floor, you can access up the front steps from Main Street and access the lobby space of the building, or you can come in the entrance on the north side and come up a half set of stairs or one stringer and come into the building that way, or by elevator. You can come in the back side of the elevator and exit onto the side for accessibility. This room here is all the patrol room. That is where the officers will come to do the reports every day. There's a small toilet facility there and here, and this is an emergency operations center or training center. So people will come in to take classroom training or other opportunities to instruct the officers. This essentially is a publicly accessible floor for all intents and purposes. The upper floor, if you continue up the stairs, again, you'll hit a little interstitial lobby space. There's some conference spaces and break area here for the officers. This area here is a dispatch room. So there's 3 stations that will be set up for dispatch and 1 for future dispatch. And then there's the manager for dispatch as well. There's an armory here. There's a a restroom here. And then there's 2 principal offices for the chief. No, the chief and then, I can't remember what the other. Captain, okay. So that comprises all 3 levels of the building.
And then I think the next slide is a little bit about
The site.
the site. You
Yeah.
went over a lot of that.
Yeah, so just to orient you, this is the Main Street side, the east side of the street. There's an office here, an office building that's remaining here. We're going to gain access to the site over here, come into a secure parking area, which will be fenced in. And I talked to you about having access into the building right there, so they would bring a detainee kind of into that location and bring them downstairs. And then there's public parking along this side, church being here. They'll come in and you can park along this side. You can also park along the street, but it'll give you access along a sidewalk to enter the building right here and come up half a step, half a landing into the main public area of the building. Good. Any questions? Good.
Let's save the questions for
Yeah.
presentation
Yep.
stuff.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is just the graph I was telling you about with the total cost of the project when we started in 2020, basically, to where we got today. And you could see that steep incline in 2022, and then it's actually maintained that level throughout. And so, next slide, Chad, we'll talk a little bit about the total cost of the project, and then I'm going to just let Chris talk a little bit about construction management and this project. So You can see on the right side of the slide, we're looking at 8,300 square feet. We've got a construction cost of $8 million. And then below that construction cost, we have lines that are, services, permits, our hazardous remediation, FF&E, legal, and contingency. So the services make up our consulting services. And in fact, that's lumped in with a little bit of what we've already paid out as we've gone on this project the last 2 years, which I think the town has spent, my last calculation is just under $600,000 to date on this project. And then our permits, of course, and Kevin, he went through the idea of the hazardous material remediation at 2.7. Our forecast for fixtures, furniture, and equipment is $500,000, legal at 32, and then contingencies at $400,000. That's the town contingency. And I'll turn it over to Chris, and you can talk a little bit about the delivery method and a little insight from your desk. That would be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening again. Chris Yandau, Engelberth Construction. My particular role with Engelberth is to manage the front end of projects, and I manage our estimating team as well. So my group and I, we've been intimately familiar with this project for a number of years now, 3 years. The town originally hired us as construction managers, and I just wanted to explain a little bit about what that is. Construction management is different than just selecting a general contractor and bidding the project. Our roles and responsibilities are much more extensive, and they support the town in their efforts. We're really part of the team, and we're offering our constructability reviews and estimating along the way, all the way through the design process. There was many meetings with David and his team in terms of how best to accomplish, a particular part of the construction. We've been hand in hand with Kevin as well on the abatement side of things in terms of trying to understand what's the best way to accomplish the construction between hazardous waste and non-hazardous waste. Also along the way, we've been providing estimating for a variety of different layouts. The building did start out much larger than it is today. And again, due to the cost estimating, our understanding of potential costs, we hadn't previously bid any of the work out, but from our estimating efforts, again, it was just felt that the building was too big. So there was a design decision to bring the size of the building down. Once the design was finally finished, it's our role and responsibility to meet with the subcontractor market, and we solicited over 200 subcontractors for this project. We have about 20 different, we refer to them as work packages, 20 different subcontractor tasks, meaning excavation and concrete and masonry, all the way through all the trades, mechanical, electrical. So we solicited over 200 subcontractors for pricing. It was a competitive bid process on the subcontractor level. We've essentially picked teams, subcontractor teams. Nothing has been authorized, obviously, yet. But again, what we were able to then do with that pricing, we put together what we refer to as a guaranteed maximum price. And that guaranteed maximum price is the maximum amount of money that we feel need to be spent on construction dollars. It's that $7.9 million you see at the top of the spreadsheet. Within that number, and again, our responsibilities to the town are total transparency. So the town gets to see all of those numbers. It is an open book process. We have discussions in terms of what's the appropriate amount of money that we need to carry in order to accomplish this with the subcontractor team that we think we're going to award to. In terms of continued escalation, that graph that Joe put together really has been, unfortunately, my life over the last 4 years. Construction costs since COVID have just continued to increase. COVID created a lot of those supply chain issues. A lot of subcontractors closed their doors, downsized, having a tough time with the labor market. And so that graph is very representative, not only for the project estimate, But again, it was what was happening as the project was unfolding, even at its larger size, the cost continued to go up, and then it finally flatlined. Again, from a demolition and abatement standpoint, those costs were more brought into focus and we understood them. In terms of continuing to try to mitigate potential continued escalation, we do have contingencies in our guaranteed maximum price value. Again, it's an open book process. Those are line items that we share with the town. We're not allowed to spend those unless we have approval from the town if something were to come up during the cost of construction. At the end of the contract, if those dollars are not spent, then they do go back to the town or perhaps pay for something else, whether it be additional furniture or anything that may come up on the town side of the ledger. Given an approval of a bond vote, we're prepared to start construction late July and be completed by the following, that'd be December of '26. There is a little overlap at the beginning of the project with continued abatement that, again, we'll work with the current abatement and demolition contractor. They'll do some work and then they'll go away, then we'll come in and do some work at a much lesser cost than an abatement contractor, and then we'll finally, they'll go away and then we'll take over. I will say that this building, it's been designed well. It does have, because it's a police station, it does have the requirements per the code. It has stricter building codes because of, in case of an earthquake, the building is structurally sound. When we start construction after demolition is done, the only thing that will be standing will be the two side walls and the front wall on Main Street. And then everything behind it is all new, whether it's structural steel to help support the masonry as it exists today, or that small bump out is, again, also structural steel.
Great, thank you. So Chad, I think I touched base on this slide, which was really just to highlight the different funding agencies we work with, and I mentioned EPA, Vermont Community Development Program, so we can probably skip that. And I know Chris just talked about the timeline. It really is a construction timeline, I think, of July through November of next year if we were to go forward with the project. But I guess the question, maybe you go to that next one. Why do we think it's important that the police station remain on Main Street? And I think I'll turn that over to Chad and Joel. And Joel, at the same time, maybe you can talk a little bit about existing conditions. Briefly, we want to make sure to leave some time for questions, and I know I'm already running over. I have that bad habit, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. When we first went down the path of what were we going to do to house our public safety facilities, we looked at the Armory Project as one that was multifaceted. It addresses vacancy, blight, and a dilapidated building that the town has responsibility for regardless. But it also keeps our police department responding from the center of our historic town. I have heard from officials at the schools, at both STJ Academy and the town school, that there is an importance of the police presence right on Main Street in close proximity to their campuses. It gives comfort to know that the PD is right there and you could immediately respond. And then, like I said, it creates a high visibility for the police department. Joel, do you have anything you want to add about?
Facility that can accommodate us appropriately. The current situation that we've got now is four processing room, 4 cells that aren't even cells, they're basically closets that you're able to hook somebody to a wall. There's no facilities in those cells. Part of our processing room is down the hall, so you have to take somebody from processing area down a hall into a conference room, which used to be office space. It's just repurposing after repurposing, and I just think that the police department is in desperate need of a new facility.
And then also to circle back, this facility does also act as our emergency operations center, and just, so what that is that's where we're gathering together as public officials in response to something such as a flood. And I can attest to last year's flooding. We're in a very small room. We made it work. My hat's off to all the people that responded, but at times we had 5 swiftwater teams from the state of Vermont trying to talk and strategize in a small room that we were also trying to strategize and make sure that we were deploying town resources appropriately. We're talking over each other. We had to bring in porta potties because we didn't have adequate bathroom facilities. And so being able to act as a good emergency response center is important. And we all know that these storms are becoming more intense and more frequent. As much as I hope we don't have to, I do expect we'll be deploying our EOC and opening that up in the future to make sure that we're responding.
Great, thanks. And so I want to talk a little bit, I did a little bit of research of what has happened in Vermont and New Hampshire recently for public safety facilities and their costs. And so I've got data from Northampton, New Hampshire, Wolfboro, New Hampshire, Exeter, New Hampshire, Salem, New Hampshire, Williston, Vermont, Swanton, Vermont, and Champlain, Vermont. And what it really shows, as you can see, the cost ranges from $10.8 million for a new facility to 38 to 24 to 15 million. Many of these in a similar size, those are comprehensive public safety that include fire, but would meet the same square footage footprint as St. Johnsbury's needs. And when I averaged out the average cost per square foot for construction of these facilities, right now it's $710 a square foot. So that's just the reality that we are living in. So when you do the math, and everybody, and nobody likes those numbers, but that's just the reality of the construction environment. You know, so then I was trying to really determine the best way to answer the question, how much is it going to cost?
Aren't you over $900 a square foot?
Yeah, we are.
$950
And I think that has to do some with the sizing and the requirements that we have to deal with up on Main Street. And I'd also just remind voters too, that we have a liability up on Main Street that we own and we're responsible for no matter what. So, you know, if their community decides that the Armory isn't the right solution, we still own the Armory and we still have those problems up there. With the exception of the remediation that we've successfully done to date.
Well, wasn't the remediation the largest part of the problem? You talked earlier.
Let's wait until the end so we can get, so everybody can answer.
Yeah, and I can answer that too. So anyway, I just wanted to show what it costs to build a new facility. So if our community decides that we need a new facility, this is what it's going to cost. And so based on today's tax rates and today's everything, if you look and you added the amount of funding, which is $9.2 million that the taxpayers of St. Johnsbury would pay, the rest was in funds that were procured, at 4% over 30 years, it would, in round numbers, cost a resident property taxpayer $100 for $100,000 of value. Now, if the communities if we were committed to building a new facility somewhere else, based on those numbers we got from those other communities, that facility would cost us $79 per 100,000 value. So you could deduce that for $21 more, you would build your facility at the Armory, and you build it faster, and you would take care of the liability that we have on Main Street. So those numbers are big, there's no question, but that's That's the reality if this community realizes that we need new public safety facilities based on the environment that we're in. And so, pretty much, that is the presentation, and we can open it up to questions when you're ready.
I would like a show of hands, whoever has questions. I don't want everybody fighting. All right, Gary.
Frank, they need to state your name fully. So
All right.
everybody can hear about it.
Yeah, Gary, you need to state your full name and ask the question.
Okay, my name is Gary Roberts. I live in St. Johnsbury. Well, I object to what we're talking about here. Primarily, maybe I should stand up. My primary objection, of course, is cost. As Joe has rightfully pointed out, we're looking at costs of somewhere around $958 a square foot, where on average, to build a new police station, as he has successfully found out, much his research kind of coincides with mine, you're looking at, on average, current numbers somewhere in the neighborhood of $750 a square foot. First off, I don't know that we need 13,000 square feet. Certainly we need a bigger police station than we've got right now, but I'm not so sure that we need, for example, the whole third floor on the one that they're proposing. That's my opinion. So obviously cost is, in my mind, the number one objection. The second objection is that, and this might seem out of left field, we have a bigger need for an updated fire station than we do for an updated police station. So we've got a combination police and fire both in one building now, all of which everybody feels is inadequate. Our solution at this point, because we have this empty building on Main Street, is to move the fire station over there. And then my understanding is we're going to also have to move the fire station at some point, which means that the select board's going to be coming back to the voters and they're going to be asking the voters to move the fire station. Well, I think this is kind of a short-term, piecemeal kind of way of looking at the solution. The long-term solution for the town really ought to be a combination police and fire station somewhere in the middle of town. Now, I've heard rumors that such a thing is in the works, but it's just that. It's just rumors, and I don't know any more about it. Perhaps the select board will be willing to talk about it. But at any rate, even if we decide that we just have to move the fire station out of there, wouldn't the existing building then be adequate for the police department with some remodeling? And my point is that we're only looking at one solution here to what is a multi-pronged problem, if you will. And I don't think that everybody, I think we're so focused on trying to do something with that armory that we've lost sight of the fact that we have a bigger problem that we have to look at, and that is, I mean, truth be told, we really ought to have a centrally located public safety building that can house all of our fire stations. Right now, we can't even put all the fire trucks into the fire station. One of them has to be off-site all the time. And the ambulance is up by the hospital and is far too slow to respond to the vast majority of calls in town. So the bottom line is, we're not looking at the whole problem. And in a rush to try to make, and I know it's not a rush, you've been working on this for 10 years, Joe. I appreciate that. But we're putting the cart before the horse. We're looking for a way to use the armory as opposed to looking for a solution for our public safety building. And one further objection, I don't live in the Special Services District, and yet I'm being asked to pay for the police station where they won't come out and see me. It's just that simple. And That's the crux of my objections, at any rate.
Thank you.
If you do the math, it's actually $1,505 a square foot.
For,
8,340 square feet, 12,558, et cetera, is $1,505.
oh, I figured it was 13,000 square
No,
feet.
it's 8340.
Right.
So it's
Worse,
$1,505.
okay.
All right, ma'am, you had a question.
I did have a question.
Can you shut that off?
Thing off.
My name's Lori Robinson. I do live within the area that I think is serviced. I have a two-part question. The first part is, you stated that it was about $100 per $100,000 for an increase in taxes, and my question is, does that include the 5.4 million we already voted in, or because I'm already paying taxes, extra taxes on that piece, I believe? And my second part is the contingency plan that was talked about. We saw the graph of how construction supplies went up with COVID. That's done. They haven't come back down. What is our contingency plan for any further projected disruptions in our supply chains? Is this the best time to?
The 5.4 million that was bonded 4 years ago has not been executed.
Is that included in the $100 per 100,000?
Yes, it is.
So that includes the entire
If this bond
9 million?
passes, you'd be looking at approximately $9.1 million, and that $100 extra per $100,000 is figured in on the grand total of the 9.1 million at the 30-year 40%.
Okay.
So that's the total that you would be looking at. So if you had a $200,000 house, obviously you'd be $200 more. So that's about where it's at, Joe.
Yeah, and just regarding the second part of that question, about potential escalating costs, those are really difficult for us to know, but I know that our team has said right along that based on their experience, they haven't seen projects that become less expensive. We only know what we know, and I wish I had a crystal ball that could tell us that if we waited, prices would go down or such, but we don't have that.
But what's your question? Is this estimate staying solid through construction, or
so
was it waiting like 2 years and seeing what happens?
There are certain populations that feel supply chains are going to be impacted again, and costs are going to continue to go up, not down. I don't expect that at all. What are we going to do if we have another spike in costs, construction and supply costs?
So as I've been told by our team, right, that we built in about $1 million in escalation and contingency based on some of the volatility in the market. And so we believe it's adequate. The guaranteed maximum price, has some conditions that are not included based on tariffs and stuff. And Chris, I would say that probably would be the part of the environment that would be the most at risk. So we know that. And the reason we're in this window and talking about it is because we have a price, we have a team put together, we could do it if that's what the town wanted to do.
So if we come $500,000 under budget, like the gentleman said over here, yes, then it would revert back to the town.
Correct.
That's correct. Is this a time for general comments or questions?
Yeah, that's what she's working through it here. No.
No, not
David.
yet, Dave, sit down.
I can't hear in this place.
Anything else, or did we answer your question? Gary, did we answer, I know you were, and I'll get to you, Peter, just a second. You were on a rant there, but what's your main focus for a question?
Well,
One question.
I guess we as a town also have to look at the fire station. And I guess I don't understand why talking about the fire station and talking about the police station are not a part of the same answer.
Okay. And that's your opinion.
Well, and I asked the select board, are there plans for relocating the fire station?
Eventually, but we got to work through this first.
So I think it's, do you mind if
Yeah,
I
no,
answer?
go ahead.
So I think it's safe to say that we understand the need for the fire department, and we are in a parallel path starting to have those discussions about what the options are. And really, it's the options about the cost of two separate facilities versus the cost of one, and the location of the police, and whether Main Street is that important to our community and our historic district, and whether there's any value to remediating and taking care of the slums and blight on Main Street at the same time. Because if you build a public safety building outside of town, we still have the Armory. And so, you know, we can't, if we want to be comprehensive in our thought process and be deliberate and strategic, I believe that we have to include the Armory in that discussion and calculation as well.
I agree, but the hard work, the remediation has been done. You talked about meeting with many people for years about trying to sell it and all kinds of different plans that different people had. And the number one objection was that it needed to be remediated, and it was an open-ended checkbook as to how much that was going to cost. Well, that's behind us now. We've spent the money. My objection is I don't think we ought to throw good money after bad, frankly. At this point in time, it would seem to me that the Armory is a much more viable entity to be able to pass on to somebody else and put back on the tax rolls, quite frankly.
Thank you.
You've got somebody online with their hand up.
I was going to go, Peter next.
I just want to make sure you were aware.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, I'm just curious what the current physical integrity is of the building today. Did we have to wait past July if this bond doesn't pass? What does this building look like in a year or two? Is it going to continue to deteriorate?
Joe?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was checking online.
If something doesn't happen to the building, what are the possible?
Yeah, so, you know, let's just cue that up, right? This is a transparent community discussion. If the bond vote fails, what do we do, right? We've got a building, as Gary mentions, that's in much better shape than it was, although it doesn't have a west wall, and it has a roof with 55 tires holding it down. It was a roof that had a guaranteed life of 2 years, 6 years ago. And we have funders that were partners and in good faith funded the remediation, right? I think our town would consider the remediation successful, but we'd have to go out and try to find, you know, a partner that would be willing to take on this project, redevelop it, and also, you know, meet the requirements that maybe our funders might have for that redevelopment. So, are we in a better place? Yes, we are. However, I will say, if we decide to start at square one and go through the process of trying to identify a location, first of all, you know, I work in economic development. I can't remember the last time I was on a project that didn't have EPA involved, that didn't have environmental assessment or brownfields remediation that was required. So when we talk about finding a piece of property to do this, I'm not saying it's likely, but I'm also saying it's not unlikely that we'd have cost of acquisition, assessment, and environmental cleanup.
But you're gonna have to do that anyway.
But-
You admitted we needed a new fire department.
Okay, Gary.
Right, well, I'm just saying, when your first point was cost prohibitive, that may not prove to be a point that is that pertinent at another site.
Who's online?
Christopher Mercado.
Okay. You're after the guy online.
Question.
No.
What did you say?
After the guy online.
Christopher Mercon?
Yes.
Okay. Chris, you're on if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, certainly can. I keep hearing nonstop about costs go up, costs go up, costs go up. But overall, the cost indexing has stabilized over the last 4 years. Through COVID, we had a big spike, and then we've pretty much leveled off. So where is this data stream going that we've got double material pricing? Because if in anything, material pricing would have gone down from the 2020 estimate. And I'm not talking about, the remediation bills, things like that. That's out of my realm of expertise, but just the baseline materials.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure, was it Chris? Chris?
Yep.
Joe Kasperzak here. I'm not sure what data you have that is saying it's stabilized. I know I'm building a house right now, and I'm not finding anything like that. As a matter of fact, things are about the same as the Armory, unfortunately, with my new house. Go ahead, Chris.
Joe, if I may, this graph that was in the packet is a good representation. To Chris's point, it has stabilized. In fact,
I mean, I just added in the chat two charts. One's from the Federal Reserve Bank, and the other one is from a subscribe service, RS Means, that I have access to. And that's just the overall materials pricing index. It can be aggregated for individual material types if needed.
Understood. The graph as presented, as Joe has compiled the estimates over time, you'll see since about December, the pricing has stayed about the same in terms of the estimation. And now we've gone through a complete bidding with over 200 subcontractors. We feel right now that the price as presented, is a good market price. It can't be compared to pre-COVID numbers. And then in addition to that, we have included in our number, again, full transparency with the town, we have included a contingency value for perceived escalations that again, we're all reading in the papers about the tariffs that over the last couple months, 2 months, have continued to go up. And then just now over the weekend, we've heard that potentially it could go back down. It isn't a complete
All of this data that is provided is pre-tariff, so that can't be used in this discussion for the estimation that was presented to us. But back to the root of the question, where is this current cost data coming from?
The current cost data that is presented in our draft guaranteed maximum price is from the subcontractor market and their pricing. There was no more estimating done. It is actual bids received from subcontractors.
Okay. So basically the bids are out of reality then. They're seeing a municipality looking for bids and basically they're gouging because in most other markets, we're not seeing this cost overrun like this at this current time.
All right, thank you. David.
Other questions?
David.
Do the needs of the fire department?
You need to state your name, please.
for planning the whole thing. Or I wrote a letter to the editor, I said we had a white elephant on Main Street. I still think it's a white elephant. Did you focus on that? Because that's the problem. But the fire department's really a problem also. And it seems to me the two should be solved together, and probably not at the Armory.
Yeah, you know, I think probably we agreed that the needs for the fire were as important, if not more important, because of the integrity of the floor in the fire station. And had the fire department been able to fit the footprint of the Armory, it's very likely that they would have been the ones to be moved first, or at least the first iteration of whether a full new public safety building should be built, or whether we should try to take the opportunity to solve the problem of a historic building that was vacant and blighted. And I think from my desk, I'll admit, I don't want to see empty, blighted slums and and buildings that need remediation in the middle of our historic district. I mean, part of the charm of St. John's area.
That solves the big problem. Now perhaps you could interest an entrepreneur to buy the thing, put apartments in there, put stores in there. I don't know what. I agree with you that something should be done, it should be used. But you got the fire department with their ladder truck, which they backed in down an alleyway and put a 180-degree turn to back in the back of the building. And the reason is the back of the building has a slab on grade, which can hold the truck. The front can't hold it. But that fire department is 100 years old. The building's 100 years old, over 100 years old.
David?
Yes.
We're concentrating on the police station.
I agree, but I think the fire station is part of the overall solution.
Point well taken.
Yeah, no, I mean it is, but we've got a bond vote coming up, and this is what's got to be focused on.
I can't hear you. I can't hear anything in this place.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? If not, I have a motion to. Oh, I'm sorry, sir.
Yeah, I'm Mike Sullivan. I think that some of the costs here that Joe put together, the town comparisons are interesting. So like Wolfboro, New Hampshire is about the same size as we are, town-wise. And they built a facility in '23 for $440 a square foot, and we're at $1,505. I don't think St. Johnsbury needs a gold-plated police department. I have real heartburn over being not in the special service district, and if you guys are gonna try and fund this out of the general fund, when the police department won't even respond to a call from my house, which I've called in an emergency situation more than once, and they wouldn't even give me the phone number to the state police. No help. So, that was some time ago. I'm not saying anybody that works there now. But that left a real bad taste in my mouth. So I think it's too expensive. I don't think special services should be funding it. Those are the people they serve. And as Mr. Yandow said, that building's all remediated and gonna be nothing but 3 walls of what's there right now. Tear it down, get rid of it, sell it to somebody else. $1,505 a square foot, $12.5 million for how many officers? Doing how many arrests a year? It's not justified, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I just want to make a comment, though. So the opportunity to tear down the Armory probably left 15 years ago, before there started to be some assessment, some testing, and also part of the procurement to get funds involves a process called the Section 106. So, Section 106 requires sign off by the Vermont Historic Preservation Officer, and the reality of tearing down, being able to tear down that building because of its historic significance and its location in the middle of the Main Street historic corridor is not an option. And we've had that discussion at length.
Well, if you don't get your budget approved, you're gonna be in a pickle, aren't you?
Well, I think the town was in that pickle right from the beginning. I think that, you know, we've been trying to be very open and creative about a solution. And, you know, ultimately it's up to the voters, right? The taxpayers of the town of St. Johnsbury. What I'm trying to do is present, though, a bit of a sense of reality if we know we need new facilities, and this as a potential alternative to the new facilities outside of town, and essentially killing two birds with one stone. That's been my effort, but it'll be up to, obviously, the residents of the town of St. Johnsbury and those that vote, pay taxes.
Any other questions?
Just something to add as well. I'm not here to convince anybody to vote for it or not vote for it. I would love to have conversations outside of this room to kind of talk about things, answer questions, everything like that. I will say, especially talking about the need for a fire station and a need for a police station, that definitely is valid, and those concerns are very valid. A lot of these have already been discussed between people in this building for all the years that we've been talking about this project. So I just want to say that the people who are here, they have considered all these different things. So to say that they weren't considered, they're definitely in the conversations. And I just also want to point out too that, especially talking about the police department and like the resources that are provided for the police department currently versus what is needed, is a huge difference. They definitely need a new facility, need a lot more resources than we're providing them. And what they're facing now is completely different than even when they were facing when we were talking about this project 5 years ago. And I think looking at the news and in the newspaper and everything like that, we can tell that they need help, and we need help bringing people here to support their ranks as well. So I just want to make sure that everyone's considering that aspect as well when you're making your decision on June 3rd.
Hearing nothing else, do you want to vote? I need a motion.
Second.
Motion second to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. We'll take a 5-minute break between meetings.
So those of you, we just do have a regular select board meeting to hold, so if people are wanting to stay at the select board meeting, you're encouraged to, but if not, we're going to be starting the meeting up. We always see people go stand over there and start talking, we can't have a meeting, so.
So we'll take a